Okay, welcome everyone to this edition, this call. Let's fix the camera. We can get a little
so
hard.
you can see us a little bit better. Oops, it's dripping. I mean, not drooping.
My name's Elisha Goldstein.
Hi, I'm Stefanie Goldstein, and let's maybe just give people a couple moments to pop on before we
Sure.
begin. Yeah, we have a few
welcome.
people showing up. Hi, welcome.
Yeah, as you're coming in, you're welcome to just introduce yourself and also just say where you're popping in from. We're certainly feel really grateful to be here, and this is a topic that's obviously close to our heart. 7 things mindful families do differently. Being parents right now of 3 strapping young lads.
And there's a lot of togetherness at the moment.
a lot of togetherness, and also different a different way of being in this idea of needing to also be parents who are schooling their kids right now, and
we're supporting them in their schooling.
Supporting them more than we had been used to in the past, and them having to adapt and do that in different ways. And no doubt, if you're popping on right now, that might be something you're identifying with. A lot of us as parents right now are experiencing things we're not maybe used to experiencing. We're experiencing a lot. There's an increase in that togetherness, which sometimes could be sweet and other times could be overwhelming. And maybe, the uncertainty of what's going to be happening. Many of us know that there's not school through the end of the year for many of our locations, and not knowing what will even be there in the fall. And so there's that's coming up potentially, or what's going to be happening in the summer. So there's a lot of feelings, that I know that we're experiencing, right now, a mix. And at the same time, there's certain things that we can do that we've learned together through our own trial and error.
And as being psychologists and working with so many other families and kids, so it's both our personal and our professional experience that has really informed this. And we actually wrote this article in January, which Mindful posted, and which was before we were all sheltering in place together. And so it's interesting to see how these 7 things translate and actually do so in a really powerful way. And so though the article, which we can link to at the bottom when we're done, wasn't written with the pandemic in mind, it still is really applicable. And I think the thing I want to say before we even start to get into the 7 things is, because we are both psychologists and mindfulness educators and married and parents, there's a lot of projection on us that we then must be perfect partners and perfect parents and get it right all the time. And that could not be further from the truth. We are in the trenches with you just as anyone else is. The difference is we have learned some tools, and when we remember in our good moments and use those tools, they're very powerful. And we've also learned different ways of being. And so I just want to really put that forward, that we are coming to you today not as these experts who are doing it all right, but that are just alongside you, and that this is a challenging time, and one that we are all being called to task in ways that we could never have even imagined. And so these kind of core foundations, if you want to call them that, are really helpful to hold in your heart, in your consciousness, in your mind as we move forward. So before we get into the list, the one thing I do want to say is the foundation of all of this is our actual presence. And I don't know about you, but I know I have found for myself that sometimes it's really hard to be present. I'm reading the news, I'm feeling overwhelmed by what's happening in the world. I'm worried about a loved one. I'm overwhelmed with the amount of laundry and dishes and needs that everybody has. And so I want to check out. I don't want to be present. And there are moments where that's okay. And in fact, it's necessary and needed, and ways in which also we can not check out, but check in and take care of our nervous systems. And so I really want to acknowledge that. And it's important to know how precious our presence is. And not only, most importantly, and first and foremost with ourselves, with our partners if we have them. I mean, I know just an hour ago I was talking to Elisha and he clearly was not listening to me. And so I was like, okay, that's all right. You can't hear me right now, so we'll talk later, because I didn't have his presence, and that's okay. And one of the things we'll talk about is forgiveness later, but to just really think about our presence and how we can cultivate that intentionally in the moments that we feel like we're able to, because I know we can't in all moments, and that's okay too. So, do you want to start talking about the first one?
I guess, okay, so let's just kind of jump in. We're going to be, as we talk about these 7, we're going to be sharing with you some stories and some facts, and maybe a little weaving in a little bit of the science. And so hopefully as you listen, you can see, hear, and feel, the experience of what we can kind of move into as an aspiration of different things we can do as families and as parenting together.
And how this might look.
And so the very first thing here is to embrace our imperfections, and some of the things that this idea might not be new in some ways, but what we want you to do, and hopefully it's not necessarily, but what we want you to do is kind of bring it top of mind. So as now that we're kind of together more than ever, some of those imperfections might even be highlighted. We might not serve our kids the type of meals all the time that we wish we could, and so we might be getting down on ourselves or self-critical, or we might be looking at social media a little bit more than we're used to seeing it. A lot more than we're used to seeing it, maybe, and seeing that other people are posting these things that maybe do seem a little bit more perfect, and so we might again be starting to be hard on ourselves for our own parenting skills. And I think the most important thing here is to, as parents, one of the things that as parents we can do differently in integrating more of this kind of mindful lens is embracing this imperfection and seeing it as part of the journey. And so one of the things we can do, just to get practical with it, is say to ourselves, like, hey, this is hard, this is different than what I'm used to. There's no book that was written that said, like, here's exactly what you need to do as a parent during the pandemic, and take this into heart, right? And so we can recognize it's a tough moment. We're all in this together, right? You can think about the people just on your block alone, that the other parents that are in this similar type of thing together. I'm not alone in this. None of us are alone in this. And the question is, though, right now, like, how can I be kind to myself? Because I am the pillar we are the foundation, whether you're a single parent or you're co-parenting, you're the foundation for the family. And so you're the inspiration, and so it starts with you. As Stefanie said, the presence of you. So how can I be kind to myself in this moment to get stronger, to keep that strength, so then that can ripple across down to my children? So that's the first one, embrace imperfections. And it's just something you can do to work with that.
So the second one is listen with curiosity. And so, there's a difference between listening and hearing. And this idea of, you ask your kids to repeat, did you hear what I said? And they'll rotely repeat the words, but they didn't necessarily hear it. And we do the same thing. I know when my kids are talking to me sometimes and I'm distracted, I'm on my phone, I'm responding to an email, or I'm in the midst of cooking dinner, or there's something else that I'm trying to do. I might be hearing what they're saying, but I'm not really taking it in. And so this idea of, again, that presence, how can we take our presence and move it into a place of really listening, being with each other? And again, I don't mean this every moment of every day, because it feels like crazy town right now at times. And we need times to have breaks, to be with ourselves, to connect in ways that are not with each other. And it's okay to set boundaries. Like this morning, my kids all wanted my attention in different ways, but there was something that I really needed to do for myself, to take care of myself. And it was okay that I set a boundary that said, not right now, because I wouldn't have been able to really connect with them. And then made a plan for after actually this time that I was going to go and be with them. And then I could give them my presence and really listen. And so often this is where miscommunications come up because we're only half listening. We're listening with our retort ready. And right now, anxiety is high. Stress is high. That uncertainty is high. Feeling a lack of control is really high. And so we're all also a little bit more sensitive. And so I think we hear things differently than they're intended sometimes. And so when we can have that sense of curiosity, not just coming in with an assumption of already knowing what someone meant or how they meant it, but instead saying, ooh, that didn't feel good. What did you mean by that? Even that alone, that small, like acknowledging like, that did not land well, but then getting curious because maybe the person says, oh, no, that's not how I meant it. And then you can say, oh, okay. And you can release that defensiveness. And so there are so many ways that we can start to, and even just small, tiny ways. So we invite you, again, this is what Elisha had said, to bring to top to mind. This isn't something you have to do in every moment. It doesn't have to look this way all the time. But notice the moments where you're not listening, where you're not being curious. You've already made assumptions about how something is or how someone feels or what they meant, because you might actually be wrong. Or maybe you're right, and then there's something that needs attending to. And that actually leads us into our third thing, which Elisha will talk about.
I also just want to know what listening also means to yourself.
Yeah.
And so you're also listening to how you're feeling too, and what's going on, being curious about that too. And typically when we are curious about another person, we have more of an opportunity for them to feel understood and cared about. And that is this third one, which is communicate courageously.
Well, and I want to add with the listening to yourself, because that's actually what happened this morning, was that I really needed to journal, and I needed that space. And I knew my kids really wanted me to do things with them, but I also knew, and I had been putting that off, giving myself that time and space. And I knew that if I didn't do that right now, I was not going to be able to show up in the way that I wanted to show up. And I hadn't actually been listening to myself and giving myself that time. And so this morning I really did set that boundary in effort to listen to myself, so that then I could be more present for my kids and my partner later. So that's a really important point. So thank you for adding that.
So with this, like with this third one, which is around communicating courageously, oftentimes there's a lot of difficult things that can happen within families. I know that it certainly happens with our family as well, and we don't want to feel bad feelings or hard feelings or difficult feelings, and so we kind of avoid it. We avoid the conversation. We avoid the tough moment, and
or maybe we're a little pokey about
or
it.
maybe we do it that way because we also want to connect, and that's the only way we know how to do it.
I poke.
Yeah, he pokes, I avoid. So, and so the key here in some ways is really, if it stems from the umbrella of what we've just been talking about, which is to understand and curious, again, listening to yourself, really what you're needing in that moment and what happened in that moment with somebody where your need maybe wasn't met. Like for an example, maybe you, and this happens with us, where with I hope this is okay for me to share. It's really important. But this is a good example for everybody, which is, some of us really need to feel appreciated, and I know Stefanie really needs to feel appreciated, and it's a core. It's one of her love languages, you might say, right? And if it's happening in the family where you're not feeling that way, as an example, it might be, to communicate courageously, might be recognizing that need and being able to say to the person, when you walked in the door and didn't just kind of like didn't talk to me, or didn't recognize how much I'd been cleaning and doing so much during the day, because now many of us are cleaning a whole lot more. Maybe you've always been cleaning, but even more than I know with us, more than we had before. And, you know, and I really realized that my feelings got hurt, and that's why I was so snappy at you. It's important to me that I feel recognized for that or appreciated for that type of feeling, you know. And so what you do is you're moving forward into the future by communicating courageously, by allowing yourself to be vulnerable and stepping into the fire a little bit. And that lays the foundation for something better to come in the future. So it's really, it's a way of kind of practicing nonviolent communication, and by understanding what your needs are and how you're feeling and being able to express that. And if you're in a relationship with your kids, it's a wonderful thing to model. If you're in a relationship with another person, it's a wonderful thing for you both to understand, so that you can, you know, work together in that way and go forward and have a better opportunity in the future for healing and understanding and caring, which makes both people feel more accepted, and there's ultimately more loving in that experience.
Well, and I just want to add, we really often lean on nonviolent communication. So if you want to look that up, it's pretty easy to Google, and there's lots of great resources. And you can find a needs inventory, which is a really long list of kind of all the possible needs one might be having in a moment, and then feeling lists of when your needs are met and when your needs are not met. And it's just a really helpful, tangible guide to give words to what we're often feeling and are not necessarily always able to connect to. And so it's something we use when we work with families, when we work with couples, even just someone individually. And so that's what Elisha is really talking about, is when you are able to communicate, this was my need that was not met, and this is how I'm feeling because of that. And then at the end of that comes the request. Your request may not always be met, because the person may or may not be willing or able to do it, and that's just part of life, is then being able to deal with that, but also being able to advocate for yourself and ask for what you need, and then figure out, if you aren't able to get that need met, what you may need to do to help take care of yourself.
And let's just loop in back that first one, which was embrace imperfection. Feel free to be imperfect with communicating courageously, because you're trying to figure it out. If we think we're going to be perfect with it, we're not gonna do it, because it's gonna feel unsafe, and then we don't have a chance. Then that leads to more misunderstandings and you know, challenges in the relationship and with kids, and so it's an opportunity for us to embrace our imperfection with it and keep playing with it.
So the next one actually connects to the example that Elisha gave about how one of my love languages is feeling appreciated and being acknowledged. And while that might not be everyone's love language, I still think it's a fundamental need to be seen in this world. And we show that in many, many different ways. And sometimes it's words of affirmation, so really appreciating someone. Sometimes it's gifts, so it can be acts of service. But right now in particular, to be able to show appreciation and gratitude when things are so intense, and there's a lot that we can focus on that is negative and scary and out of our control and not going well, and all the freedoms we feel like we have lost, and all of that is real and true. And at the same time, practicing appreciation and gratitude doesn't take anything away from that truth. And in fact, it creates more spaciousness to hold both, because both still exist. And the fact that it's springtime right now, I know many of us are going on
in our part of the world anyway.
Yes, in our part of the world, on many walks in our neighborhood, because that's what we can do right now. And the jasmine is in full bloom, and it smells so divine, and the flowers are coming out and their vibrancy, and there is beauty around us. And so to be able to just even appreciate that and have gratitude for that, or if you have a home, if you're able to have food, even if you have lost your job but in some ways feels somewhat secure in this moment, whatever the situation is, there is something to be grateful for. And then relationally within the family, I know for me, I make it my practice that I thank people for a lot of things, even if it's that he ran the dishwasher, or, you know, my kids took their plate to the sink, even though we've asked them 1,000 times to do that, and that's what is asked of them, that they clean up after themselves and load the dishwasher. I appreciate them and I thank them when they do that, because it's positive reinforcement, but it's also saying, I see you. I see you. And right now it's easy to not really see each other. And especially if you have teenagers. I know a family member of ours was saying with her teenagers, she feels like, she's living with roommates right now. And so it can feel very different, where you're not even necessarily connecting because everyone's in their own corners doing their own things. So having these moments of expressing gratitude, of expressing appreciation, and it just takes a moment. And it's very little effort. But when you do that, it can really start to shift the energy, because if people are doing a lot and not feeling seen and not feeling appreciated, then they start to feel resentful. And because there's so much togetherness right now and not a lot of ways to get space, and we can't, for most people, have any sort of outside help that you might have usually come into the house to help, we really want to try to soften any resentments to create an atmosphere of appreciation and gratitude.
By the way, just so we're clear about this, there's plenty of science right now that shows that a regular practice of gratitude is correlated with statistically significant increases in a variety of scales of well-being and stress reduction. When you can prime your mind in that way, it helps you be more resilient for the difficult moments that follow. And if you're more resilient, your stress is lower, it follows that your body's gonna feel less tense potentially. There might be, who knows, less propensity toward, and it might be more, might support your immune system, which is something that we could all use during this time.
Yeah.
So it's just just to be clear, that is really based in science. But most importantly, it's probably that it's based in thousands and thousands of years of human experience as being something that's beneficial. So again, what we might be telling you in that moment might not seem new, but it's important that it's just brought top of mind.
Yeah.
And that's the key thing. I think we'll go into the next one. So the fifth one is really about forgiveness. So one thing's mindful families, we might say, at practice, more routinely, is this idea of like forgiving ourselves, which goes back with embrace imperfections, and also forgiving others. Because holding the burden of being resentful, let's say if you were not appreciated and you don't communicate courageously, and instead you just hold on to that. Like if we tighten our fists together and hold our fists tight, or tighten our muscles together and just hold on to them really tight, if you do that long enough, you're going to start cramping. And it's going to feel more stressful to our bodies and our nervous systems. And that's just what we're doing emotionally. We're holding on to something. And instead, we want to be able to release the burden. So some of the things that we do to release the burden is we communicate courageously, we take care of ourselves with self-compassion, but we recognize that the person that did something to us, let's say, they likely did it out of their own ignorance or confusion or distraction or pain that they were in the moment. And so we can release the burden, and we can communicate courageously as a practice, not as an outcome, but as a practice, right? Something to practice. The other thing I just want to mention in here is, I feel like I have to practice that routinely with my kids. Otherwise, like we can get just too overwhelmed with just if they're not meeting expectations the way I would like them to, at times. The other thing is to just have a learning mindset around this. And so forgiveness is recognizing that, as Lily Tomlin once said, forgiveness means letting go of any hope for a better past. But we can treat it as, if I did something and I'm holding it myself in contempt in some way, then I can, or if in my relationship this has happened, here's a phrase that we like to use, which is forgive, investigate, and invite. We forgive ourselves for the time gone by, what happened just now. We're just, as a practice, we're releasing that burden, but we don't just let it go necessarily. We investigate it. And that's part of that is communicating courageously or listening within ourselves. So we're drawing on the earlier things that we had just mentioned. And we investigate, like, how did this happen? What was the fallout of this? What needs to happen next, and how can I do this differently next time? Right? So we investigate it. And then we invite ourselves to begin again. So we forgive, investigate, and invite. And that's one of the ways we learn how to forgive ourselves and forgive each other.
And one thing I want to add that feels really apparent to me in this pandemic shelter in place that we're in is that everything feels harder. And I think we are all struggling in some way, whether someone is communicating that or not, or it seems obvious or not. And so because of that, I think we're like all these little porcupines that are trying to be close and connect and poke each other sometimes. And so to also maybe have a greater sense of allowance right now, because I think when we think about difficult people, it's because they're having a difficult time. We're difficult when we are suffering. And so when we can hold that both for ourselves, when we're being a difficult person, it means we're suffering. And when our family members or anyone else is, it means they are. And I think right now we all are on some level. And so when you can hold that in your consciousness, there can be more room for forgiveness, more room for missteps, and being able to make repair and come back with a little bit more ease and a little bit more quickly. So I just wanted to add that piece because it feels really important about what's going on right now. So now we're going to move into number 6, which is practice support and generosity. And this one's complicated right now because, normally in a normal time, we could talk about all the ways you might be able to donate or go, feed your local firemen or volunteer at your food bank or all of these normal ways that we know that it's important to be of service in the world. And yet we can't do most of those things. And so how can we tap into our own spirit of generosity and give in ways that we are able to? Because many of us are not able to give financially right now. I'm sure, I know I've seen many GoFundMe pages, requests for donations. So many people are in need and greatly in need. And you may not be in a place to give financially, and that's okay. And maybe you are compromised, maybe your immunity is compromised, and so you're not someone who's able to even, help your 80-year-old neighbor grocery shop. It's okay. There are ways that we can still find to be generous and to support. Maybe just reaching out for a friend that you've been thinking about who's maybe living alone, or maybe is living with their 3 children and you're wondering how they're holding up, and just sending a text of love and support. But also communicating and including your kids in this. One of the things that we've been doing is, because our kids' school usually start with a morning meeting, we've been starting the mornings with a morning meeting. And we do a little bit of mindfulness as a part of that. And we end it with a loving kindness practice where we just ask everyone to go around and think about who they want to send loving wishes to right now, to someone who is struggling in some way. And sometimes it's themselves, sometimes it's one of our animals.
Or it's not even sometimes someone who's struggling. Sometimes it's just someone who they want to spend.
Yeah, who they want to, just send that loving kindness to. But including them, talking to them. There's also a great organization called Mindful Littles. It's out of Orinda in Northern California. It's a nonprofit. They do a ton of service learning, social emotional mindfulness practices and resources for your family, and ways that you can create peace boxes and send them to healthcare workers on the front lines. And all their content is free right now. So I also really want to just give them a shout out. So Mindful Littles, they have great resources and how you and your family together can find ways to be generous and support and just have that generosity of spirit, even if it's not money. But there can be, people are going out on their streets in the nighttime with signs, just cheering on healthcare workers and appreciating them, putting signs on your trash cans, thanking your sanitation workers. There are these ways which we can still practice being of support.
Making it fun. And another thing to just kind of consider is maybe getting on a group session with your friends or family, and together making this a topic to talk about. Like, how can we all practice generosity and giving, like, during this time? Like, what can maybe we do together, or what are you doing? And then you can generate ideas through that and kind of just make it, in some ways, just playful and fun. I mean, one of the ways that one of the things that we're doing is, I've opened up the Mindful Living Collective to the entire world now for free. And some of the things that we do in there is we run these mindful living circles, which are these 45-minute live circles that people find a really concentrated experience of connection and support, in those. And that's just kind of being just offered to everyone, and live events in there offered to everybody. So we're just trying to be generous in that way by opening a whole space there that's gathering the entire mindfulness community together, or anyone interested in that type of space. So that's something that you're welcome to check out. It's just a gift space for you that a lot of people are volunteering and being of service to help support that structure for the entire world. And that's just mindfullivingcollective.com if you're interested in that. But this feeds into the next thing, which is the seventh thing, which is really with everything we've said here and in general, don't forget to play and have fun. Like, this is a serious time. We're getting news that's very serious, that we're hearing about on the edge of our seats at times, seeing, like, what's the next glimmer of hope, that we can see, like, where are we now, and what's in the United States, like, and what's happening with the general election that's going to be happening, and what's happening with all of this, and will my kids go back to college next year? Like, what's going to be happening there? My kids are in sports. Are they going to be able to, do that? Summer camps.
Summer vacations.
So with ourselves, we have to take all of this and be playful with it, all of these 7 things, and experiment, be playful, try things out, so have a playful mindset, a learning mindset around it. And also, like, we have to kind of integrate specifically just moments of having fun together. So find out within the family, like, what's fun for everybody. Because maybe somebody maybe we kind of rotate different people's ideas on different.
Same thing with a lot of families are rotating who gets to pick what movie they're watching, but yeah, playing board games, going out just on outdoor adventures in your neighborhood while wearing your masks and physical distancing, of course. Even just playing. I mean, my sister, for my kid's birthday, got them those big rope things that make the big bubbles, and just something that simple. Even our oldest was loving it. And so these small ways where you can just have fun. One of the things we love to do is watch funny animal videos. That brings our family a lot of joy and shifts the mood into lightness. And watching, the Hamilton cast sing. And so there's just ways that are just so important to connect and hold this moment lightly, because even though there's so much seriousness going on, there's also something really beautiful about slowing down and having this time and being able to just be and connect and sometimes play.
Yeah, we just want to. Is the final word there is just, we want to be intentional about, like, inspiring positive moments, during this time. And so we can do that with our kids, pretty easily by just being spontaneous or gifting them, an experience. Like, even buying at a note, maybe if you're strict around the desserts in your house, like one evening on a Wednesday or something, like out of nowhere, like say it's ice cream night or something like that. And like all of a sudden, like you've created this incredible posive experience.
Or baking together.
Or we're going to bake, it's a cookie day, or something like that. Whatever can be spontaneous and fun. Like, make sure that's the element of surprise. Don't let that go. Like, that's just a little thing that can make things, even more fun during that time. So that's the question. So a lot of people ask, like, okay, so how do I start? You gave us the 7 things. Like, what do I do. And the 15th century Indian poet Kabir said, wherever you are, that's the entry point.
Yeah.
Wherever you are, that's the entry point. So just start where you are. Play with any of these types of things. I definitely recommend as a parent or a grandparent here, or anything like that, if you're feeling overwhelmed or you need support from other people, definitely look into the mindful living circles that are in the Mindful Living Collective. Again, just available to you for free. So you're welcome to that. And bring all of these things just into your family. And just be playful and start where you are.
And so I will just review as we end. So the 7 things mindful people do differently.
Families,
yeah. Sorry.
There is an article called 7 Things Mindful People Do Differently
this
too.
This is our takeoff of that and the families. But the foundation is our presence. The first one is embrace imperfection. Listen with curiosity. Communicate courageously. Practice appreciation and gratitude. Forgive ourselves and each other. Practice support and generosity. And don't forget to play and have fun.
And I know an infographic is coming out of this thing pretty soon. That's our hope. So
fingers crossed, mindful.
Yeah, come on, mindful.
So thank you all so much for joining us. It has been such a pleasure. And we will put links in the bottom of this video, both to the article, so you can have the written article, as well as to the collective and to Mindful Little, so you can check that out. But thank you all so much. We wish you so much ease and grace and health and safety in this time.
Okay, bye for now.